Oh, heal, yeah. If you want to buff your buds, the aid is for you. What do you get when you take the kool out of Kool-Aid? Well, you just get aid. It's a second level spell for clerics, paladins, and artificers. It can also be used for clockwork, soul sorcerers, or divine soul sorcerers. This abjuration spell is in the player's handbook, and it's one of the first ones that you can get once you reach that third level of cleric or paladin, and it's pretty helpful overall. Aid lets you boost the current and maximum hit points of up to 3 creatures by 5 health points. So that is current and maximum. And that is a duration of 8 hours. So for the next 8 hours, which in many cases is probably an adventuring day, you can get 5 additional HP for 3 of your allies. It is a range spell, so it's within 30 feet of you. Essentially, as long as you can see them within 30 feet, you can use aid to give them this buff. We like to think of this one as everyone getting a little more muscly, a little beefier, and a chiseled jawline to a degree, each getting progressively more as you expend higher spell slots. You also don't need concentration for this at all, which is pretty incredible to me. No concentration, lasts for 8 hours, 3 targets, 5 additional health points at the base. At the base. It's not a roll for how many health points is this. This is purely 5. Flat. Rules as written for aid. Your spell bolsters your allies with toughness and resolve. Choose up to 3 creatures within range. Each target's hit point maximum and current hit points increase by 5 for the duration. At higher levels, when you cast this spell using a spell slot of 3rd level or higher, a target's hit points increase by an additional 5 for each slot level above 2nd. There are verbal, somatic, and material components for the spell, with the material being a tiny strip of white cloth. Size of the cloth being tiny, well, means it could be anywhere between 1 inch and 1 inch, all the way up to the size of, an intellect devourer, or as we like to call them, brain doggies. A key piece here is allies, and that's a real thing to focus on. Anytime that a spell is more specific always trumps general. So allies is the key word within the aid rules as written. So what is technically an ally? Are you an ally? I think you would have to work with your DM a little bit to understand, can I cast this on myself? There's no clear answer about this at the moment. Philosophically, yes, you are an ally to yourself. Hopefully you're treating yourself well and would consider yourself as such. But because it says specifically 3 targets or 3 creatures within range and allies, to me, that means 3 additional. So you have 3 of your friends, you don't want your homies to drop later in battle, and so you're going to give them aid. Aid is also an action. You rarely aid yourself. A lot of times you're aiding someone else. So for me as a DM, I would rule this as you cannot cast aid on yourself, but I understand if others may feel differently. How about you? How would you rule in aid about casting on yourself? Left to be determined is what happens when the duration of the spell ends. So say you're mid-combat, 8 hours in, and this spell wears off. The spell effect for aid is no longer available. I would rule this as max hit points, obviously drops back to what it was previously. So let's say you're at 45, I give you aid at 2nd level. You go up to 50. After that 8 hours, that max drops back to 45 where you were originally. What about the current health points? To me, this is where you have to make a judgment call, and I think it depends on the situation. If you're already below that maximum hit points, I'm just going to leave it. I don't think you need to take 5 off of the current, because you could also potentially drop a player at that point. I don't really think that would be a fair ruling, and so instead, I would just take it whatever it is above max at that point. So if you're at, let's say, 48 out of 50 from aid, and you go down to that 45 base, I would just drop the current HP to 45 as well. Everybody's good, and we just go from there. Every spell slot you expend past 2nd level is 5 additional HP. So 2nd level, 5 HP. 3rd level, 10 HP. 4th level, 15 HP. 5th level spell slot that you're going to burn, that is 20 HP. So suddenly, as you start to scale that up and as you start to upcast, it becomes more and more valuable. When we think about uses for aid, it seems fairly clear. Your wizard pal's at 10 HP. Not anymore. He can be buffed. That glass cannon is not so glassy. In combat, the only time I would think about using aid is if all three or three of my teammates are down. If just one is down, I'm not going to use it to stabilize only one person. There are other ways of doing that. But if three go down, let's say there's an area of effect blast that hits three of them in a full radius, I'm going to consider using aid to bring all three back up at once. It's one action to bring three back up. I think that's fine. You're stabilizing three of them. So if they're unconscious, you can stabilize all three. They go back to 1 HP. I talked about allies in Raw earlier, so here's where one use could be cheesing it a bit, but I think you could probably convince your DM, oh, hey, like this one NPC that we accidentally downed, or these three NPCs that we were going to talk to that we thought were our allies, I would like to bring them back as well. So you could stabilize them mid-combat. Maybe you needed to talk to them. They had something that they needed to offer. I don't know, you could use it. I probably wouldn't waste a second level spell slot on that. While you could use this in combat, really this is a buff that you want to start your day with, or you want to end the previous day with to buff up. Think about it as, hey, I know that things are going to be a little tough today, and so I'm going to expend this second, third, fourth level spell, and for 8 hours, you're good to go. Those three allies that you have, they're max HP is boosted, their current HP is boosted, everything goes up for them. Makes it a lot harder to kill them during battle. But think critically about which party members you would want to give this to. If others have high resistances and are going to have the damage, maybe you don't need to give it to them. But if it's someone who doesn't really have much natural armor, is the tank of the group, and doesn't have a way to have any damage or isn't immune to any damage, consider giving aid to them at the beginning of the day. You can cast aid more than once, but you cannot cast it on the same individuals and get additional buffs. You can't stack aid on top of stack. So if you give it to your barbarian, you can't then give it to the barbarian 4 hours later and have that stack even further. It would just be a one-time implementation. Now, if you multi-class into sorcerer and want to use metamagic, or if you are working as a clockwork soul or divine soul sorcerer, you could use metamagic in order to extend the spell, meaning before you take a long rest, if you have a second level slot or higher, you could cast this and burn a sorcery point to essentially extend this. You can use extend duration of your spell to make it 16 hours. That means it would be the 8 of the long rest and then an 8 more on top of that. So your entire next day, most likely. But that means that you can burn all those spell slots that you don't currently need because you're going to take a long rest and you're going to get your sorcery point back. You're also going to get all of your spell slots back at the end of that. Now, if your DM allows rest casting, this is where aid is much more beneficial because you can say at the 7-hour and 59-minute mark, hey, I'm going to cast aid on these three folks. And then suddenly for the next 8 hours, which is when you're waking up and going off adventuring, they're going to get that buff. I think rest casting is insane. Like one D&D even added rules around that, but end of the day, hey, whatever your table is cool with, whatever your DM is cool with, roll with it. Use the rules that are at your table. You can further improve aid by stacking. So think stacks on stacks on stacks here. Hero's Feast is a great spell to cast with aid. Again, if you're burning spell slots at the end of the day, Hero's Feast, 24-hour duration, and extends that another 2d10 for maximum hit points and current hit points. So if that max is increased, it doesn't matter about current if you're about to take a long rest because it gets filled up the entire way. The Inspiring Leader feat is another great way to stack this because it grants additional temporary hit points equal to your level plus your charisma modifier. So on top of the 5 hit points that you're giving back and adding to the maximum, you're going to give even more to the temporary hit points. If you're also then using Hero's Feast, suddenly you're adding about 70 additional hit points to members of your party, at least 3 of them who you're casting aid onto. So it's a pretty good way to buff your party if you're going into a huge battle and know about it. So if you're going into an adventuring day and it's going to be critical for everyone to be fairly healthy, you can buff all the way up to 70 hit points. Like, so why wouldn't you do that? Looking at the history of aid, it's transitioned quite a bit from 1st edition all the way up to 5th edition. D&D 5e is the first time that it doesn't require touch. So all previous versions you had to touch an ally and it was only one target. So aid in D&D 5e is 3 targets in a 30-foot range. So you don't even have to be next to the person in order to grant this buff. It's also shifted from the schools of necromancy and conjuration to enchantment in the 3rd edition, and now to abjuration in 5th. So I think they kind of just said, to hell with it from 3.5 and decided, hey, we're going to make this abjuration. We're going to really just enhance this spell quite a bit and make it a more favorable one to cast. In 2nd edition, it had 1d8 additional hit points for the duration and the benefit of a bless spell, but only one target. The hit points also went away when damaged, so that was definitely a detractor from using aid. In 3rd edition, same thing, you had 1d8 temporary hit points, there's one target, by touch, only for 1 minute per level. Also morale boost on +1 for attack rolls. Then in 3.5, they boosted it further to 1d8 plus the caster level up to a max of +10. So you start seeing this evolve and evolve and evolve, and then they're like, I don't know, maybe nobody's using this anymore, so we're just going to say 3 targets, 8 hours, you get 5 flat until you upcast. It's much more powerful than it's ever been in 5e, and I kind of love that they just threw everything out the window from previous editions. I really like that it's 5 flat, and I think that it's beneficial to parties, especially that have 4 individuals, because it's just those 3. You can cast to those 3, and they have that buff, especially if you're casting before you go into a long rest. If you're able to extend it, even better. If you're using rest casting and can buff that even further, hey, all more power to you. I think for clerics, this is one that you should definitely have. A lot of people are going to say, at lower levels, it's not as beneficial, but when you're 3rd level, you're still pretty squishy. I think this is helpful for you. But it comes down to, are you going to use this versus some additional spells, maybe ones that do damage along the way. So there you go. That is aid in D&D 5e. Hope that was helpful. Let us know below the best use you've seen of aid in your games. And until next time, thanks for watching.